Well, hello. Welcome to the MuseCast. We're so glad that you're joining us again today. We have our regular Tuesday afternoon dates, and that is fantastic. I am Shawna Boren, and we've got Dan Moore and Osheta. No,
Kent.
Dan Kent and Osheta Moore. I'm just, we're one big happy family.
Crazy right now.
Last name.
We have to combine our names, like one last name wrong.
We have Kenshita. We have Shawna Moore. We have, anyway.
Oh, my word.
Welcome. We're glad that you're here. Really quickly, I know a lot of you, and I know you, Dan, and you, Osheta, have been concerned about my lack of having Bluebell up here. And I just want to let everyone know that, and I know I'm late to the party on this one, Ben & Jerry's chocolate chip cookie dough is legit.
Really?
It is legit, and I am happy, once again. Happy and a little fluffier for discovering Ben & Jerry's.
That's a big discovery.
I know, right?
I mean, yeah.
Have you guys had Ben & Jerry's?
I don't know if I have. I can't keep track.
Go ahead.
Oh, I can't keep track of all the ice cream I've had, unfortunately. It's just too many.
Well, I have had it, but here's the thing. I think my age is showing because I don't think I can handle dairy as well as I used to. Oh my gosh, the other day I made hot cocoa with whole milk, and I was my stomach was upset the whole night. So then I made it the next day with like lactose-free milk, and I was like, great. And so now I'm like, okay, body, I guess we just don't.
We're not doing that anymore.
Like that anymore.
This is a geriatric show.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
We're gonna start complaining about what hurts and how expensive everything is.
Well, Dan's wearing a blazer because he's cold inside.
Yes, it is. It's cold.
My word. Oh, goodness.
My word.
Well, what a service on Sunday, starting with Greg not being there. Greg is healing and recovering well, right, Dan? You've spoken with him recently.
Yep, he said he's feeling a lot better. And then, it kind of comes and goes, but I think he's kind of coming out of it pretty good. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Amen to that. So keep praying. He has to stay home and quarantined a little bit longer. But he's following everything he's supposed to do. So that's really good. So because Greg wasn't there, we had Kevin step in, and Bill was already a part of the docket for the weekend. And I really enjoyed the conversation between Kevin and Bill. And I said this on Sunday, but it's still true. I really love just the raw, honest questions that we get sent in. Like people, they don't need to like make it soft. They just send it in. I don't want to do this, or what about that? So it was like a really good discussion. What stood out to you, Dan, from the weekend with Bill Doherty and Kevin Callahan? Yeah,
it was really great to hear, Bill, first of all, he's just so calm, cool, and collected. And he's just got this sort of a mix between like a therapist and like Mr. Rogers kind of vibe going.
Yes. Yeah.
And I really liked that. And he had so many really great things to say. And, but I think what I liked most, I guess, as a way to serve as a foundation for the discussion, because anytime you have a discussion, you end up kind of going all over the place to a lot of different topics. And I think Kevin starting off with this passage from Jeremiah was a really good way to sort of ground the whole thing. And he quoted from Jeremiah 29:7, where God tells his people to seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. And I think, prayer is definitely, praying for the city is a great thing. But, when we're talking about all of the hostility that we have toward one another right now, it's not because other people are praying for different things. It's because they are pursuing different kind of like ways of leading the country and whatever. And so even though this passage specifies prayer, I think as a principle in general, like trying to find out what will prosper the city, and by the city, I mean everybody in the city, the people of the city, not just the not just the wealthy, not
Yeah.
just the, you know, the advantaged, but everybody. How do we, or another way to say that is how do we help people who aren't prospering in the city? And so I thought that was a really great foundation for the discussion going forward. And that stood out to me as a way to kind of, you know, like if I'm having a conversation with somebody, just recognizing that, first of all, the conversation that I'm having isn't going to help the city. You know, it's just not, this isn't where I'm going to get that return. I'm going to help the city by, you know, supporting organizations that are teaching kids how to thrive in school, and or helping organizations build tiny homes like we do at Woodland Hills.
Right.
Those are the types of things that will really help the city. My little debate with some Yahoo at Starbucks, that's not going to help the city much at all.
You know, when you were talking, Dan, it reminded me of something I literally saw on social this morning. And they were talking about the Supreme Court nomination and the confirmation and all that. And on the comments, someone said, yes, God heard the cries of his people and answered our prayers. And then a follow-up comment was, well, he didn't hear all the cries of all his people and answer all of our prayers, because some of us aren't, you know, praised. So it was, but that's just to your point, like, we all have different hearts and different desires, and we could be praying to God for certain outcomes, and sometimes they don't align, but we're praying to the same God, and we're praying for the good as we see it, but they don't always align with what someone over there thinks is good. So that was just really interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
Osheta, what stood out to you from Bill and Kevin's dialogue this Sunday?
Well, I was going to say the same thing, you know, Kevin grounding it in the passage, but what stood out to me was more the emphasis on God, like telling the people of Israel to like build houses and settle down and marry and have sons, and so this like idea of you're going to be in this together. So like care for the ground, care for the community, care for the people. Like this is your home. Like basically like take care of your home.
Yeah.
Even though like your desire would be, and I think as when we say like kingdom people, like we're desirous of living into that already, not, yeah, like we desire to be like living into the kingdom of God, to like, but like we're exiled here. And so there's a sense of like, here we are as people who have this countercultural, this different way of living, this alternative way of being, and we, you know, and we're looking at all the brokenness around us, and we disagree with all the brokenness around us, but yet we're going to say, this is our home, and we're going to do what we can to care for our home. And so I think when somebody asked like, well, why do this? And Bill said, well, like, this is our country. Like we're like, we're family. Like we have to figure out, like, we can't have like a divorce. Like we've got to figure out how to live together. So I think just, you know, tying it back to that, that's what really stood out to me. So then when the question came of like, well, where's Jesus in this? Or like, what is, like, how is this like kingdom? Well, it's kingdom because in Jeremiah 29, God says, well, you may be exiled and you may wish you didn't have to live in this particular context with these particular political like oppression and this sense of like not settledness, but I'm asking you to figure out a way to settle down and make a home and build relationships. And that as you pray for their peace and prosperity, you will see peace and prosperity. And then we go on to like the over-quoted scripture of like, for I know the plans I have.
Yes.
And God is saying like, I know how you living as my people in this context are going to be a plan of prosper and goodness. Like I want, like you are my ambassadors in this space. Yeah. Figure out how to make a home here. And that was a challenge that came to me from the message.
So good. And I love, you know, as you said, you go down a few verses, that famously quoted Jeremiah 29:11. And what people seem to not always talk about when they're quoting that verse is this was said to a people in exile. Yeah. And so God is making these promises to them while they're in exile. Yeah. And it sounds like we're all on the same page, because I too, there was so much from the conversation on Sunday that stuck out to me, but I was just really floored, touched, challenged, encouraged by the Jeremiah 29:7 passage. And I think just the picture of forging a path, walking a path little by little, like etching a new way into the earth, really spoke to me that we're not to be separate, you know, like we're in the world, but not of it. We've talked about that. But why does this stuff matter? Why are we talking politics and not just Jesus? Well, because our lives are intertwined, right? We don't have like our Christian life and then our everyday, like, no, our lives are all encompassing and intertwined. And we're supposed to be etching a pathway into the landscape of the earth, little by little, in the way that we interact, in the way that we go about our daily lives. And so that was such a beautiful challenge, I thought. And that's why I said on Sunday, I feel like Jesus is like thread throughout. This isn't some separate, okay, now I'm going to put on my time to talk politics hat and go do that. Okay, now I'm going to put on my engage with the community hat. Like, no, this is supposed to be like an all encompassing thing. Dan, I feel like I know you well enough to sense that you've got some things bubbling in your head that you'd like to say.
Well, and what's weird about it is that I feel like it's stuff that's kind of forming in my head still, and I would love your both of your thoughts on it. Just in this idea where God calls us to kind of make the city that we're in, make it prosper, and there's sort of this sense in which, don't worry about the promised kingdom. Don't worry about the promised land. That'll come. For now, see what you can bless what's there. And and it's just sort of this idea of, I think we all hunger for some type of revolution in this country where we could get rid of homelessness, and we can help with the cost of living, and we can give people fruitful jobs and fruitful work. And I think we all want some type of revolution that involves kind of some of the racial problems that we have and all of that. And we want that, but I guess what I'm thinking more and more about is what is a good use of my time and my resources? Is it pursuing revolution, or is it serving people in the situation that we find ourselves in? I hope that there's a revolution, but I'm little old me. I'm not the one who's going to bring the revolution. And I think about this on a small level, like when I'm interacting with family members who have radically different political views than me. I listened to, like, I met with somebody a week ago, and this guy listens to podcasts and talk radio 4 days a week at least, probably more. And he reads blogs, and so when he sits down with me, he's got hundreds of hours of content that he's just looking for people to dump this on. And then I have another friend who's the same situation, but from the opposite perspective. And they both come to me with all of their little buckets full of facts and arguments, and they're so convinced. And I just look at all of the time that they invest. I mean, all of the time that they invest in their podcasts and blogs. And I just wonder, is that helping your say-so in the world? Is that growing your say-so in the world? Because I don't think it is. I think it's growing whatever say-so you're getting that information from. And I would rather help people grow their own say-so. I want to help people so that, not that they're, have the right ideology, but that they have more power in the world personally, that they learn new skills, that they understand themselves better. I don't, I'm coming to a point where I just don't care what a person's political perspective is. Right. I want to know, how much power for good do you have? And are you using that for good? Or are you frittering it away on something that you're just not going to get a good return on? Even if you're right about, let's say a Supreme Court judge candidate, you might know exactly that this is either the best or the worst candidate possible, but it's not going to make any difference in the world, most likely, unless you are one of the most powerful politicians in the world. It's likely not going to make any difference. And so the question is, how much time are you investing for that? And I don't know exactly what to do with all that, but I feel like the world right now is nurturing Christian disciples to invest themselves in exorbitant ways in things that give them very little return. And I would love to see people invest themselves in things that give them bigger returns.
Well, yeah, and I feel like one of the things that Kevin pointed out about this verse that I so loved when he was breaking down welfare, and he talked about shalom and peace. And of course, I thought of you, Osheta. But then he went on to talk about what that means is like wholeness for the people of the city, and where everyone is thriving and there's mutual harmony and well-being. And what about, like, if we could all get on board with that, I think we would see amazing things happen in our communities, in our state, in our country, and in our world. But I'm preaching to the choir, right, Osheta, right now. I talk that kind of language. I mean, it's not like you're writing a book and I've already written a book or anything, but yeah, bringing that peace, bringing that shalom to the citizens of the cities in which we find ourselves as exiles. It's pretty spectacular, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I would say, one thing that stood out to me was when Bill talked about resist, and then the middle word was replace, and then repair, right?
Repair, yeah.
Yeah.
Good memory.
I didn't feel like it there were minutes my age. And so here's what I'm perceiving is happening with this politics debate or this politics conversation, is that we are solidly in a resisting kind of posture, or we are in a repairing kind of posture. But we as a church have not done a very good job at like what that replace is. And I think that this passage is giving us a vision for like, what is it that we are proposing in the place of the thing that that the brokenness that is caused that we're resisting against. And so what I think is our unique contribution to this conversation is not to say like we're kingdom people so we don't engage with politics or we don't care about politics because we want to be all about the repair work, like the reconciliation work, or we are kingdom people and so we're speaking out against the empire that's crushing, so we're constantly in this resisting posture. But I think we need to do the work of like building that replace, like what is it that we're actually about? What is it that we're actually going to be doing?
Yeah.
And so if our conversations are like, what does our spiritual formation look like, so that we don't get our sense of identity and worth and spend all our time filling our mind with all this information that we want to dump on somebody, but we're so solidly grounded in who we are, so that naturally flows out. Like that is a replace. Like, what does it look like for us to do the work of making room for young girls who find themselves in unexpected pregnancies, so that they don't ever have to have that question of, can I keep this baby?
Right.
Do I need an abortion? Like, is a church on the front lines of that kind of work? Like, I am more curious about, and I guess I'm echoing Dan, but I am more curious about building out that middle place, so that when we have this conversation, it doesn't trigger those very real like fears of like, you're not speaking out, or all you care, or all you're being so divisive. It's like, no. We have something new to offer. And I think that's what got Jesus crucified. Was Jesus was like, I've got something new to offer.
Yeah.
And we just have to be the ones who proclaim it and live into it. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, Scott and I always talk all the time about how we're so tired of hearing about everything people are against. I want to hear what you're for.
Yeah.
I want to hear what you're about. Like, what are you for? What are you trying to push forward for the good of others? Because everyone can tell you what they're against. An anti this, an anti. Okay, wonderful. We get it. However, now how can we proactively start to do that middle piece right there, which I think is so, so key.
That's a good way to put it, because when you are speaking about what you're against, you're sort of speaking out of your fear. And when you're speaking for what you're for, you're speaking out of what you want and your hope and all of that. And that's a more pleasant conversation anyway. That's, just on its merits. It's just, I would rather have that conversation anyway, but
that's the difference between peacemaking and peacekeeping, right? So peacekeeping is all about anxiety, and you like protecting what's important to you, and you making sure that like you're comfortable or you're not shaking the status quo. It's really out of this like clenched fist kind of posture. But peacemaking will have a difficult conversation, or it will be uncomfortable. But it's like this idea of like, hey, I have like we are moving towards something bigger and better and more beautiful. So let's do that work of getting there, not just like hold back and just kind of keep the peace. And so and I think a lot of the times we treat our vote as an act of peacekeeping. And I'm just wondering, what would it look like if we use our vote as an act of peacemaking?
Yes. Yeah. I love that. I had this like one of those eye-opening aha moments on Sunday, and it turned out good, but initially I was like, crap, I got work to do. It was when Bill was talking about policies versus people. And he talked about how, because one of the questions asked was about, well, what about the 500 babies, kids that are caged down south? That's wrong. And so Bill's response, initially I bristled at, and he knows this, and then it challenged me. And then I was like, crap, I have work to do. Because when he said, nobody is okay with that. Like, no one is okay with that. But if you take it up a level and you take it out of, take it up a level, then you can have policy debates about immigration. But at the heart of it, and everyone cares that those kids are in the situation they're in. And my initial thought was, no, they don't. Or else they wouldn't have allowed, like, I literally had zero grace or compassion or even a mind to think that someone who thinks differently than I do on that particular issue, cared the way that I care. And I got one of those little hand slaps from our sweet, loving Father.
Yeah.
Because I cannot make those assumptions. And so that was just really eye-opening for me. I'm like, I still have work to do. Does that make sense to you guys?
Oh, yeah.
Are you guys like way further than I am?
No, I think that's what Greg talks about when he says, that we take the biggest and the loudest voice on the furthest end, and then we paint that picture across every person who holds that, who's in that party or who would vote for that candidate. And so I think that for me, like, I would be like, no, they don't. But that's because I've heard somebody who would vote, and who said, oh, that's a good policy.
Yeah.
Say like, oh, well, that's, and so then I kind of assume everybody.
Yeah.
And I do think, like, I think one of the things that I wish we could have talked about more, because Bill kind of touched on this, and I just think this is part of the work of the church, is like, none of this is made in a vacuum. Like, we really need to do our work of like understanding the history of our country and understanding like how all the different, like, what are all the different threads that have like contributed to what we're looking at, like what's going on. Because I would say that, there probably were a lot of people who would not have voted for Brown versus the Board of Education simply because they were raised with racist ideology. And where did they get those racist ideology from? Like, like we go all the way back to the original sin of enslavement and then the massacre of indigenous people. And so it's like, okay, we need to cultivate more spaces where we can have those conversations about like what got us to this place. But I do think that, like that can't be separated. I think when somebody asks a question like that, well, like, what do you do with this? They're actually asking a question of like, help me understand how all of this, like what all happened to get us to this place. And that's not something that any of us can answer on a Sunday morning in a Q&A. It really does look like Kingdom people making spaces to have those kind of conversations.
Yep.
Yes.
I think the only thing I would add is that I think that you can understand that what's happening on the border is because of a much higher level problem that is a problem for everybody, even though it's playing itself out in this way that we all don't like. But at the same time, I think you can say, we're a people who we're thinking about colonizing the moon, and we have space rovers going to Mars. This seems like a problem that we should be able to solve. And if we can't solve it yet, that's fine. But I'm not going to like praise and think highly of politicians if they can't solve this problem. And just the idolization of some of these politicians, it should keep us from idolizing politicians if we can't solve something as simple as ripping kids from their parents. I
not knowing where parents are and how to reunite. It's just thought we were a little bit smarter than that, but I guess not.
But there's so many things that contribute to that idolization that we really have like gotten away from the concept of a public servant, which again, I think is all tied into like education. Do we understand if this is our family? Do you understand like how our family ancestry, basically?
Yeah. So let's bring it to our living room, because there was a question that came through on Sunday, and I think that many people were like, yes, I agree, or yes, answer this, please. I think we've all been there. And this person was just this is what I was talking about, so raw and honest, and said, you know what? I have zero interest in having debates with my family members who are on the other side of the aisle about these things. They are not going to change my mind. I am not going to change their mind. But because they have been listening to our sermons, they're asking the question, okay, should I try to have this dialogue, or do I need to stick to we're not going to talk about this anymore. We're not going to debate this anymore. What do you guys think?
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to talk because no one else was. So I have nothing really good to say other than I think what Bill said was you have to kind of know your own heart. If you need to have boundaries there because it's affecting you emotionally in some bad way, I think you just need to do that for your own mental health. But again, I'm coming back more and more to this idea of what is my return on investment here. And I think of like, people who develop relationships and friendships with people of different colors or different political ideologies or whatever. And I'm seeing things like that as being a lot more fruitful. Like if you have a friend who has a different perspective or comes from a different background, to me, I'm going to get a bigger return on my investment there. I'm going to have a bigger return on my investment if I maintain a peaceful and loving relationship with a family member, no matter what they believe, because politics and ideologies shift and evolve and change. And if your relationship shifts and evolves and changes as the tides change in culture, that's going to be a very superficial relationship. And so the only thing I would say is, if I'm going to be in the relationship, I'm going to strive to have the relationship transcend whatever political issue we're discussing. And if that means me just letting the person have their perspective and not challenging them on everything, that's okay. Like I said, I'm not, even if I were right 100%, and even if I could convert this person, it probably wouldn't make that big of a difference. It wouldn't make as big of a difference as having a loving relationship with them will in the long run.
Yeah. I say quickly, and then Osheta, sorry. I just say, like, don't debate. Like, leave the debate out of it. You can still have conversation, but don't debate. Just don't. Have conversation because you have a relationship and you care for that person, and seek to find that common ground of loving one another. But trying to debate to convince you of something that it seems pretty clear you're not going to be convinced of, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, yes, or yes, but, and I'll quickly say this, is that I think that there's a couple things going on. One, I do think that what Bill talked about with Braver Angels is that they kind of have an agreement when they're coming to the table from both sides of, like, this is what we're going to talk about, this is the posture we're going to have, la la la. And when you're talking to your uncle or your parent who believes differently than you, they may not agree to those boundaries or that set of, like, this is how we're going to have that dialogue or this conversation. And I think putting themselves in that position might be a little unhelpful. So I think for me, my go-to when I know that there's somebody I disagree with, and that the thing that they're saying, like when they say that or they do that, bothers me so much. Like, it really goes to that enemy love value that we have of, like, okay, well then I'm going to pray for my enemy. Like, because I define my enemy as the person who's on the other side of my empathy, like who I am unwilling to understand or unwilling to dialogue with. So that's when I go to that space of, like, I will pray for that person until my heart is changed about that person, or until God opens up an opportunity for us to have that conversation where I know I'll be safe emotionally and I know that I can offer a safe space to them. But until the Spirit has opened up that opportunity, I don't know that it's super healthy. There's no return of investment.
Yeah. Possible. Yeah. And I think when I was saying I'm not going to debate, when I maybe this has just been my family, debates never are like, like you learn in school. They're not cordial, and you get your 2 minutes. I get my 2 minutes, and we're not going to talk over each other. Like, when I've been a part of debates, they've been contentious and back and forth, and I'm not interested in that. If I love you and we are really disagreeing on this thing, I'm going to continue to love you. I'm going to continue that God would protect my heart toward you, that I can continue to walk in love toward you. But if it is not healthy for our relationship, then we're not going to do that clash. We can have a conversation, but I'm not going to do that clashing thing, because that just gives an opportunity to erode the relationship.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, you guys. Yeah. Well, here we are again. We never think that we have much to say. Like, literally, like, this one will be about 10 minutes. Never. So, but really quickly, I did want to end with a quote, and I feel like it really wraps up everything we've been saying very nicely in a pretty little bow. Things that you've said, Dan, things that you were just saying, Osheta. So I'd love to read that before we say goodbye to our MuseCast community. Sound good? All right.
Right.
So this is from Timothy Keller. He's a pastor in New York City, and he says, tolerance isn't about not having beliefs. It's about how your beliefs lead you to treat people who disagree with you. And so, Absolutely. Have your beliefs,
right.
but how are you treating people who aren't on the same side of that? How are you pushing for the welfare of your community, of your city, of your state, of your country, so that we can all be in harmony, so that we are mutually beneficially living with one another, amongst one another. So
Yeah,
that's what I have
that's
to say
great.
about that.
Woo!
That's beautiful.
Good.
It's
All
so
right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Come back next week. We'll be back and we'll be having more conversations. Thank you for being here. We'll see you then.